I'm waiting for the prices to come down a bit more. Does that sentence sound familiar at all? It's what I hear time and time again. Or it's, hey, are the prices going to go down further? Is this the bottom? And those are all fair questions to ask. For the conversation that I just had, waiting actually cost them $28,000 because see, what happens is there comes a point where good inventory after waiting for a long time and buyers come back in, that inventory gets absorbed. And then next set of properties that come onto the market, that new absorption price is the list price. So yeah, this conversation was last October and prices had already changed by 2%. So in today's video, I want to talk about Guelph specifically. And if you're tracking inventory in Guelph, you do have to be neighborhood specific. You have to know the nuances of South Guelph versus North Guelph versus West Guelph, what neighborhoods, what schools. You're going to have to get clear on that. However, for today's video, we're going to touch on the waiting math. Okay, and it's absolutely okay. And it's actually encouraged to be cautious. The market is and was and continues to be confusing and even uncertain. However, working from this assumption, which is what I hear with buyers looking in Guelph and Oakville, the Greater Toronto area, and the assumption is if I wait long enough, the prices will drop enough for it to be worth it. And that assumption has a math problem. I'm going to walk you through exactly that today. And hey, if we've never met before, my name is Varsha and I assist families with making real estate decisions and finding home. It's about making thoughtful decisions in changing markets. Most buyers right now are waiting for one of two things. They're either waiting for the rate to go down further or they're waiting for prices to fall even more. And let's be honest, they're actually waiting for both at the same time. The Bank of Canada's overnight rate is sitting at 2.25%. RBC Economics recently published an analysis saying the Bank of Canada is likely done cutting rates. Their position is that when the next move, whenever that is, more likely to be a rate hike than a cut. Those decisions are driven by what's happening with tariffs, our inflation. These are real risks to the economy. So if you're a buyer in Guelph sitting on the sidelines saying, I'm going to wait for these rates to drop even further, the analysis from Canada's largest bank is that rates aren't dropping any further. And of course, is all of this subject to change? Perhaps. Perhaps they'll surprise all of us. Forecasts are forecasts. Nobody knows for certain. The view is that we are at or near the floor of the rate, which means the conditions that have kept buyers on the sidelines, waiting for a better rate environment, those conditions are as good as they're going to get. This is as good as it's going to get. And this connects directly to prices because what keeps prices elevated in a market like Guelph, in a market like we're in right now, isn't just supply, the volume of buyers that are sitting on the sidelines. And that's a metric that many miss. Every buyer that's been sitting since 2023, there will come a moment where something clicks in their personal calculations, whether it's a rate cut, whether it's a policy change, an announcement regarding tariffs or jobs, a spring market headline. When that happens and it clicks, those buyers don't just trickle in, okay? They kind of jump, they flood in. I mean, we've seen it. That's what's been happening in 2023 when rates paused for the first time. And then it happened again in late 2024 when we had back-to-back rate cuts. The market doesn't ease into recovery. It jolts. Now let's talk about what's actually happening on the supply side in Guelph, because this is where the opportunity is and where the risk of waiting kind of lives simultaneously. As of mid-February 2026, there were 403 active listings in the city of Guelph, 180 in the detached segment and 223 in the condo. Months of inventory sits at 4.3 based on an average of about 93 sales per month. That's pretty much in that balanced buyer territory. Now listen, 4.3 months sounds like a lot of choice. You do have to be product or property type specific when you're looking. But that is sort of the point. There is choice. But this is also what people are tracking, okay? Projections for spring actually suggest that our inventory could go up to 5 or 6 months of inventory as new listings flood, come in, accelerate into the market. So that typical spring surge, more homes coming into the market is really good for buyers when you look at just sort of surface. On the surface, it's really good. And here's also the catch. if demand responds at the same time. And when that happens, the absorption rate climbs up with it. Absorption rate is simply the rate at which available homes get bought. Okay, so now let's walk through that math. Right now, Guelph is selling 106 homes per month. There are 403 active listings. That gives us 4.3 months of supply. Now imagine a scenario where 15 to 20% of the buyers that were sitting on the sidelines enter. They come back into the market, and that's not being dramatic. That is reality. And they decide, okay, now's the time for me to enter this market in that same 60-day window. Maybe rates hold and spring headlines say market stabilizing, or maybe even one rate cut happens. And with all of these job cuts that we've been seeing, maybe there's an employer that says, hey, we're hiring, like a major employer. Okay, these are headlines, they come out. And believe it or not, this affects buyer psychology. And that kind of shift in buyer psychology, it happens quickly. If monthly sales actually just jump, we were sitting at 106 sales, say we jump to 130 sales, that's that small increase of just 25%. And if new listings coming into the market do not come in as quickly as these sales have happened, that 4.3 months of inventory then drops to 3.5 months, let's say. You're now in a different market. Conditions start getting rejected, especially if you have that really big risky one that sellers view as risky, where you have to sell your property. Say you're a buyer and you have to sell your property. You have to tap into that equity to purchase the next one. So you put that sale of purchaser's property clause into your offer, which a lot of folks have done so successfully in this market. Say you're getting verified, getting that pre-qualification. When you have a live offer, your lender is going to offer you a much better product. Say you need a full home inspection. Those conditions start getting tighter. The option to put conditions in your offer get more difficult when you're competing with other people for the same property. And at 3.5 months of inventory, there's going to be competition. Multiple offers start appearing again on well-priced homes. We're already seeing it, have been for the last month. Homes sitting at day 35, 40, they start seeing offers. And the buyers who've been watching them for 2 months, they start competing. It happens all of a sudden. This is the absorption math. And I want to share that with you because this is the kind of conversation that I'm having day in and day out. And sometimes it lands and sometimes it doesn't. It really matters how open and receptive the client is and how much that motivation to move, to change, to want to buy is. That's also a big factor. The very thing that creates opportunity for buyers right now, that low demand, is also fragile about it. It can change in a single spring week. Okay, so let's get grounded in some actual math for the city of Guelph. And here's what February 2026 has shown us. The average sale price right across the city of Guelph is sitting at the $713,000 mark. Again, that's average for all property types, and that's down 10% from the year prior. The freehold average is sitting over $800,000 and that $830,000 mark, while the condo segment is sitting in the $522,000 mark on average. So prices are down year over year, and if you bought in Feb 2025, that average, you probably paid about $80,000 more. The buyers who waited a year did benefit from a lower price. But just humor me, I want to walk you through what waiting could look like in the next 12 months. In scenario A, we have prices dropping another 5%. Optimistic. If Guelph drops another 5% this year, which would be a significant second-year decline, on top of already being down 10%, the average moves from $713,000 to $677,000, okay, roughly. That's a $36,000 difference. And here's also what happens in that 12-month gap. Okay, where you're waiting for these prices to go down, optimistically 5%. If you're a first-time home buyer, perhaps you're continuing to pay rent in those 12 months. In Guelph, the average rent for a 2-bedroom is sitting in the $2,100 to $2,400 per month. So for the sake of this, let's call it $2,200. So at $2,200, you're looking at $26,400 in rent over a year. And that is money that builds zero equity. Additionally, please stay with me because this is important and it's really specific to Guelph. If you're buying, say you're buying at the end of that wait, so now you're moving into 2027 for that purchase price because we've already established that we're going to have a 5% reduction, that optimistic scenario that we're building here, yes, your purchase price is going down. However, you're renting, but you're also qualifying with the same pressure at the end of your wait. And Guelph's property taxes, having already risen 7.87% in 2026, and that's compounding on the fact that it went up over 8% in 2024 and another almost 7% in 2025. The carrying cost of a Guelph home is rising independently of the purchase price. So in this scenario, if we're looking at your net savings, okay, so purchase price gone down $36,000, your rent $26,400. Let's deduct that from that $36,000. You've got about $9,600. That's assuming prices actually fall 5%, which is not forecast. In fact, in this scenario B, if prices hold flat, which is actually what most forecasters are expecting, you save nothing on purchase price. You spend $26,400 on rent and you've lost 12 months of building equity. And listen, you don't have to tell me, sometimes rental math works for people. There is a place for renting and I absolutely encourage and advocate for it. I'm speaking to the buyer pool that is just sitting on the sidelines, completely prepared, but kind of stuck, and calling it a rate decision and calling it, oh, this headline said the market is crashing. If you're happy just sitting there stuck, that's one thing. Let's not deflect what's really happening here. A realistic example is a Guelph average of $713,000 for a property. And say you put 10% down and you lock in a rate for 4.5%. For 25 years, your mortgage payment is somewhere in that $3,500 bracket. And yes, I know that's higher than paying rent. Your first year builds equity of $13,000. That's your equity through principal paydown. Okay, separate from appreciation, which if you're purchasing in this market, I'm already telling you that it needs to be a long-term hold. You're not looking for a quick flip. You're not looking for a time where you think you're going to make $50,000 in the next year. You're buying with a long-term vision. That principal paydown counts towards your appreciation. Okay, so just for fun, let's look through a scenario where prices actually go up 3%. If the spring market triggers even a modest bump of 3%, let's say the average climbs back to $734,000. Now you're paying more than $20,000 for the purchase price. Plus, we've already established that $26,400 that you're paying in rent. It's a $47,000 miss waiting a year. None of these scenarios really reward waiting. Even the scenario with the 5% reduction in price, that really only nets you $10,000 the most. Look, I'm not telling you the market is perfect right now. It's not. Sales are down year over year. Prices are softer. Sellers are motivated in a way that they weren't before. In 2021 and 2022, couldn't have imagined this kind of flexibility in our seller pool. And all of this is true. What I'm saying is those conditions, the buyer-friendly conditions, they exist right now. They don't exist in some hypothetical future state where prices have dropped 15% magically. They exist today. 403 homes on the market. Days on market at 45. Sellers accepting conditions. There's closing date flexibility. The sales to listing ratio is sitting at 41% in Guelph. That means less than half the homes listed are selling each month. That's buyer leverage. But that's also a ratio that can shift quickly if demand picks up while supply doesn't. So ultimately, the question isn't whether to wait for a better market. The better question is whether you recognize that you're already in it.